Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Jeff McKay from Brightscript. We're going to talk about privacy compliance for psychologists in Alberta. First, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Judy Malone to give us a little welcome and introduction as to why we're all here.
Super, great to see everybody here today. We're really happy with this. When we have a valued partner and they're able to bring additional benefits to our members, psychologists are curious types. We really appreciate understanding more and going into detail. And so this opportunity to learn about that interaction between the Health Information Act and psychologist practice here in Alberta is particularly welcome. And we're looking forward to understanding those threats of privacy specific to patient information and current best practices. This is an ever-changing landscape, so it is something that we continue to stay on top of and love learning about. So I do want to share that I very much appreciate Rohit, Ingrid, and Jeff that you're joining us here today and made this available to our members. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Malone, and we're going to move forward so we respect everybody's time here. We're going to go through new rules coming for psychologists in Alberta to help you understand what to expect in the near future. We'll look at what's coming under the Health Information Act, as well as new federal regulations that we are expecting relatively soon. We'll talk about privacy compliance under the Health Information Act, look at several components of that, what that means for you as a psychologist in Alberta. We'll review privacy breaches, how they impact your practice in healthcare, what they look like, where to look for ways to avoid them or prevent them. And we'll talk about secure communication. As Dr. Malone pointed out, we are a valued partner here. There is an agreement that we have with the Psychology Association of Alberta for some benefits for you. Before we really dive into it, I want to introduce our primary speakers today. So Rohit Joshi and Ingrid Rise. Rohit is a lawyer with a background in privacy compliance and contracts and technology. Rohit is the CEO and co-founder of Brightscript Secure Communications Corporation. Ingrid has a few decades of privacy compliance experience. She's been consulting in privacy compliance since 1987, according to LinkedIn, Ingrid. So a real resource in Alberta. She is the one, when you talk to people about privacy in Alberta, Ingrid's name comes up in the first couple sentences. So we're really grateful for both of them to be here today. Brightscript's resume in terms of privacy compliance, we've written thousands of privacy impact assessments for healthcare clinics, healthcare organizations in Alberta and in Canada and beyond. We have trained over 3,000 healthcare professionals in Alberta around privacy compliance, privacy breach prevention, cyber awareness. Our privacy team, Ingrid leads a team of privacy professionals at Brightscript who are always in learning mode. So we're always adding to the credentials on the team. So there are changes coming up to rules, and we expect, and even in my conversations with Dr. Malone and the team at the Psychologists Association, in the next update of the Health Information Act, psychologists will be added as custodians. Right now, there are 11 identified custodians in Alberta. We're expecting psychologists and physiotherapists to be added in the next update, so that's coming relatively soon. When that happens, there's changes that are going to come into effect, and we'll talk about some of these. Privacy impact assessment will be required. There are new fines and sanctions that you will be under, which are up to $200,000 per individual or $1 million per clinic organization. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how those come into effect. Specific safeguards requirements, there's certain ways you have to protect patient or client information. Mandatory privacy breach reporting, which already you're under based on PIPEDA in Canada. So if there is a breach of information at your office, you would be required to notify the Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner in Alberta, any patients affected by that breach, as well as the Minister of Health. Currently, if you can go to the OIPC website, the Privacy Commissioner's website, and look at all of the PIAs that have been accepted, there are no psychology clinics in Alberta with an accepted PIA in Alberta. Now, that is a little bit behind the times if you're on here saying, but wait a second, I did that a couple months ago. They're about a 12 to 24 month, I think, Ingrid, you said this morning, wait time to get those processed. Also, new federal privacy legislation, as I mentioned, is coming through. That's meant to align with GDPR in Europe, which has become the gold standard in the world. That's why you see a lot of lawsuits coming out against large corporations with massive fines in Europe. It'll apply to all businesses in Canada. So it's not just a healthcare thing, but it will apply to every organization in Canada. And we expect something like a PIA to be mandatory in that process. Privacy really is a whole new world. I'm going to be quick on this slide, but understanding privacy comes with a lot of acronyms, a lot of different terms that we'll go through some of these, and I don't want to spend too much time, but this is why we're here today, to help you understand what you're getting into.
What Dr. Malone was saying, and I think it's relevant, for sure, things are changing, and this is a rapidly changing environment, as much as it is for us, as it is for all of you who are actually providing the service. What was interesting to us is we've done this now for probably 4 years of regular training and regular discussions. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the most people that have signed up and registered for this type of information in the past 4 years. So clearly there's an opportunity here for all of you to become more and more in tune with what's going to happen from a legislative standpoint, but also from our perspective, really appreciate the interest, because I think we're all on the same page of trying to understand how do we balance the needs of the patient and their need for privacy, the profession's need for privacy, and ultimately how do we regulate that, or how does that exist within a regulated environment. So this is super interesting for us because of the level of interest of your membership, Dr. Malone.
Yep, and that's a great point. And the other thing that's really important right now is we've seen in the last 2 years is a rapid change towards digital technology, which greatly impacts privacy compliance in the eyes of the clinic and the providers, as well as to patients, right? And we've seen a huge interest from a patient perspective in how is my data being used, how can I be better protected, and that sort of thing. So I will point out, because we do have such interest, we have a reserved time for questions at the end. There is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar control panel on the top right of your screen. Feel free to type those in at any time. We'll do our best to get to all at the end of the presentation. So moving forward, risks to clients from a privacy perspective. This list is actually taken directly out of the PIPEDA legislation, which is a federal privacy legislation. If anything happens to patient information, here's what could happen to your clients. When people ask, what's the big deal? Why are people so interested in healthcare records? Patient records are worth up to $250 now on the black market. When we started doing this presentation, it was about 100, it went up to 150, and now we're seeing that people are spending $250 per record. To put that in perspective, as it says here, credit card numbers are worth less than $5, often really less than $1, because credit card fraud is quite difficult. How does compliance impact your practice? Privacy breaches are rarely planned. Privacy compliance is really about operating in a way that is safe and can take reasonable steps to prevent reasonably anticipated threats. It's not about being right and secure all of the time. It's really about making sure that you're doing things properly to prevent reasonably expected threats. In Alberta, so last year, Alberta awarded first damages for public disclosure of private facts. So it's really changing legally in terms of precedent. Privacy breach at Red Deer Hospital last year affected thousands of people. We look at former Vernon psychologist in BC disciplined for breaching patient confidentiality. There's lots of things that are a lot of times procedural for healthcare providers to make sure that they're operating properly. So we're going to move in now that we kind of have that basic understanding into sort of the meat of the presentation to get you a basic understanding of the Health Information Act, what it means, and what compliance really looks like at your practice. So I'm going to turn things over to Rohit and Ingrid to take us through that.
Thanks, Jeff. Ingrid, it'd probably be best why don't you take the first couple of slides.
So the biggest thing to remember is that the Health Information Act is one of the strongest legislations in Canada. As a matter of fact, it is the strongest health legislation across Canada. What that means for us, though, is what does it cover? Well, as all legislations relating to health, it's about the diagnostic, treatment, and care information, and that's a given. It's also things like your health service provider information. So as a healthcare service provider, your information is also protected under the Health Information Act. And of course, patient registration information. That's a given. It leads to their address. And as soon as you marry that with, of course, what diagnostic treatment or care they're getting, you have health information. As well, of course, it governs and regulates, I love that, the access to, and guess what, collection, use, and disclosure of health information. So if you don't really remember much else about today, which I hope you do, but remember collection, use, and disclosure, because it is dominant through every act in the world. It's about how you're collecting, using, and disclosing health information, personal information, financial information. It's all what controls the privacy and the legislation. And then, of course, we have an obligation, and it's a very, very important thing to remember, is that we have to protect the privacy and confidentiality of the health information that's entrusted to us. It's our duty to safeguard this information. And then, of course, it helps health information being shared across system. And so an example would be many are involved, psychologists are involved in health information, predominantly, let's say, in primary care networks, where they're sharing information with other custodians, such as doctors or such as RNs. And that information we know needs to be shared, but it needs to be controlled shared. It can't just be shared willy-nilly. It all has a reason for the control. My favorite topic. My rule of thumb with safeguards is remember apt. You're apt to remember it. You're apt to be safe if you remember that the clinic safeguards that are mandated are your administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. So your administrative, well, guess what? People, that's all of us. We all have a responsibility to follow the administrative processes, and that's primarily our policies and procedures. Things like computers, make sure we have the correct passwords, long and strong, as we say, even better. Our telecommunication, make sure it's secured. Verbal patient charts. For example, we can't send patient charts just, oh, let's just Gmail this. And we've got examples where people have tried to Gmail patient charts and have been actually hacked. And then all of a sudden now Alberta Health Services is notifying 7,000 patients because a doctor went through Gmail. Yeah, that wasn't too smart. But anyway, that's a whole new story. Physical, of course, your area, your surrounding area. I like to call it clean desk policy, but call it what you want. And do as I say, not as I do, because my desk looks like a disaster zone, but notwithstanding that, I'll clean it up, I promise. Your things like restricting access. If you have your files in the storage area, let's make sure that that's a restricted access and not patients can't just walk in and pull a paper file. Paper is still a high risk, only because you can't control who's seeing it, which falls under, of course, your technical safeguards. So, controlling computer and network access, it's critical. And it's rarely the technical that goes wrong, although it has happened. But these are the safeguards to kind of keep in the back of your mind what is required to do and what the Health Information Act literally tells you what to do.
Yeah, there's so many things that as you start to dig into health and health information and systems, the value of doing the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards it forces you to think a little bit differently about the things in your office, the things maybe in your home office, the things that you're carrying with you even. And so here's some examples of, as we start working with you, or as you start considering different things, think of the fax machine. Now, I think healthcare is probably the only place left in the world where fax machines are still used, but there's been multiple interesting cases where fax machines, which also double now as printers, they have hard drives in them. And so if you've been printing off anything with respect to patient information, it's likely being stored on that system as well. And there was one significant breach where, the clinic returned back a fax machine to the leasing agent, and it in fact had about 33,000 patient files on an unprotected drive that was inside of that fax machine. Disposal of protected health information in a dumpster. Someone was clearing out their office and threw that information out, and 1,600 patients were affected. And you know, as we work through this presentation, we're going to start stepping you through collection, use, and disposal. Well, the first two are really about disposal. How do you know what to do with information once you are done with it? Paper record stores that were stored in a home left behind. So in this example, I think it was this example, Ingrid, where the clinician had brought, you know, paper records home because they were, you know, they ran out of room at their clinic, and then the clinician actually passed away, and there was all of these patient files that were sitting in the home, and so there was a massive breach because there was no care and control of these patient files. We're going to get into this in a little bit. The actions of the staff people within the clinic, even though they're not part of the Psychologists Association, there's an obligation for you to be training your team on privacy. And that's come out in a number of recent decisions in Alberta, where even though there was a privacy impact assessment, there was rules and responsibilities and rules and policies that were sitting on the shelf, the staff had never been trained on them, and they held the custodian liable. And then ultimately the custodian becomes responsible for all third parties that manage that information. So really important for you to start considering what technologies are going to be used within your system. Who are the cleaners that are going to come in and clean up the clinic? You know, what is the security company and how good are they? Who's taking away the garbage? And on and on and on. And this is just a start. We'll get into it later on in this presentation.
And I wanted to reiterate that we have seen in the last 10 years, breach after breach after breach, where the custodian is the one in the end, or their affiliates if it's malicious, that actually gets pulled to the carpet and said, why didn't you train people? Why didn't they know? It's wonderful to have a privacy impact assessment, but more important is, are your people trained on this information so they know as well? It's great to know, but they need to know too. So that leads me perfectly into who does the Health Information Act apply to? Well, guess what? The bottom line is everybody, pretty much. So custodians. So albeit psychologists are not, as of today, a custodian, they are actually treated as a custodian. They have the same onus to protect health information as ones listed in the Act. Honestly, I think the P's were an oversight because they miss physiotherapy as well. And yeah, I think they just missed the P's. But anyway, I'm just kidding. But custodians under the Act do have a higher obligation to protect health information. Absolutely true, because the onus lies for them to ensure affiliates are trained and to make sure the privacy impact assessment is done. But that being said, as an affiliate, which many of you may be if you're in a practice with a primary care network, or even if you're in a practice and there maybe is a psychiatrist as the lead, then you still fall into the Health Information Act as an affiliate. So sadly, we're all still caught. That didn't come out right, but you knew what I meant. So affiliates, though, are very important because they're the ones that actually have the same onus to protect health information, but are actually oftentimes much more frontline. This includes things like medical office assistants, the receptionists. All of them become an affiliate because they work for a custodian. And these affiliates on the front line are especially important to make sure they understand the significance of the Health Information Act and how it affects them and what they need to do to protect health information. And then, of course, the information manager are your vendors, and that could be your electronic medical record provider. It could be your shredder. It could be your storage company. So it also has a wide range of people that they catch. And then there's, of course, agreements that need to be in place, because the bottom line is they have an onus, again, to protect health information, as would you. There you go. There's my 2 P's.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting about
yeah,
you know, the custodians is that And you've already mentioned this, Ingrid, is that psychologists were kind of left off. But you know, in evidence of how many people are even interested in this training with us, from where we're standing, the psychologists actually care a lot about privacy, even though they weren't named in the Act. Now, we do know that you will be named, and so some of this may be a little bit in advance of your detailed obligations with under the Act. However, better to do it now because you'll be ahead of the pack, better to understand what's coming, and better to start tailoring your processes and procedures already, knowing that this is going to come down the pipe. Ingrid, what's interesting really is around, you know, even though they were named, the sense is that they would be held to account in the same way that any of the custodians would be. And I believe that to be true as well, just from the interactions that we've had with the Privacy Commissioner.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the truth be told, I do believe it was an oversight, but the treatment is that you still have the same responsibility.
Yeah.
So as a result, it's just like the formal paperwork wasn't done, literally.
Yeah. It's going to change, right? And I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, and also don't forget the information that psychologists hold is actually much more critical, let's say, than many of the day-to-day, you know, medical information that doctors collect, let's say, or I'm not picking on any profession in general, but even dentists or chiros, like they're all important, of course, but psychologists have that mental health component that is so critical.
Yeah, completely. You know, the Act is unique in a couple of ways. So on the slide currently is the responsibilities. These responsibilities are actually written into Alberta's Health Information Act. And in fact, this is what makes it, I think, the most stringent privacy regime in Canada, because these are actually documented. So let's go through them. The first is that there has to be a record of the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. And Ingrid sort of showed you what those mean. But the fact that there has to be a written record is really interesting. So it's not just good enough, for example, to let your staff know that, by the way, at the end of every day, make sure there's no patient files sitting on the desks. The truth is that it needs to be written down. One, so that they can document that that is a policy, and secondly, that you can train new staff coming into your environment that is a policy that everybody needs to hold to. The second is sanctions, and again, this is unique to the Health Information Act. If one of your team members tries to breach or actually breaches, you as a custodian must impose sanctions against that individual. Again, and again, this is something unique to this Act. I don't know of another Act that sort of puts that onus on a professional in Alberta. Make sure that affiliates are aware of and adhere to all safeguards. Again, training. What is your training plan for your privacy policies? What's your training plan for all of the procedures that you work with? Agreements. Third party could be, and Ingrid, fill in blanks here, your cleaning staff, your technology providers, your security system in your home or your home office, not in your home, sorry, in your home office or in your office. All of those disposal companies, all of those require written agreements.
Yeah, virtual care, cleaning staff, like the list is so large, it actually is. But there's a system to do that. You just need to demonstrate that you've complied. Yeah. Correct.
And you know, we've got lists of for example, shredders, companies that have agreed to make sure that your information is kept confidentially, and not all of them do, which is really mind-boggling. But again, not every shredding company is working with a healthcare provider. And so you wouldn't necessarily they wouldn't understand the necessity of holding that information in as much control as we require or as the government requires. Periodically assess these safeguards. So we've got kind of a, you know, we recommend a 12-month program of, you know, this month make sure that everybody's got their passwords updated. Next month, it's something else. And just sort of looking at all of the safeguards within your clinic. And finally, within a clinic, you have to designate a privacy officer. And this is, someone who's going to respond to questions about privacy within your clinic, within your practice. And so even if you're a sole practitioner, I'm going to guess that you are the privacy officer, and someone can challenge you and say, what are you doing with my data? And it's reportable if you don't have a good answer.
So an affiliate. So if you aren't caught in the custodian area, you're caught under an affiliate, because an affiliate is anyone that, again, collects, uses, or discloses information on behalf of a custodian, and they have the same onus to protect. And I can't reiterate that enough, because in a hospital, the custodian, let's say, may be Alberta Health Services. I still haven't figured out who that magic building is, but anyway, they have that. But everyone working there has that onus to protect health information or patient information. So again, making sure all those agreements are in place, making sure that your staff understand that this is highly confidential. And I will be honest, psychologists are way ahead of most, because they've always understood the importance of protecting patient information. So, but affiliates will include your vendors, even volunteers or students that maybe come by, or staff that you employ. So it doesn't matter on the level, they all are an affiliate. And then information managers, easy breezy cover girl. Anybody that stores, uses, changes, alters, or is in information technology is an information manager. And really the way to look at it is who's managing or may be managing or altering your information or even storing it. So your electronic medical record vendor. Now, if you have paper files, which a lot still do, that's one thing, but you still may give it to a storage company after you've had after it's finished its term. So all of those things still require that to happen.
I think we're going to move now into privacy principles, and so although we've spent a little bit of time on, the act itself, I think what's interesting now is jumping more into the principles of privacy, because no matter which of the acts we talk about, the same privacy principles apply. And so, Ingrid, why don't I know this is stuff that we talk about every day. Why don't you take your run at it, and I get to be color commentating.
Yes, and I've seen some of your color commentary, and I get in trouble.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
There are 10 principles in general for privacy legislation around the world. But really the 5 that we pay attention, because they actually are the most applicable, are the basic rules. So least amount of information. Things, for example, like a podiatrist doesn't need to know that you went to the dentist yesterday, but what they may need to know is what medication you are on that may cause swelling of the feet, or maybe painkillers that were prescribed for pain, which is mimicking in the foot. They need to know that. They don't need to know that you have a filling in your R12 molar, if there is even such a thing as an R12. So that least amount of information is very important to keep in mind. The need to know basis. So not everybody needs to know everything. So a receptionist doesn't need to know the file or all the information in the nitty gritty in the file. They just need to know the appointment, what time the patient's supposed to be there, and any billing or required information. So that need to know basis is in your office. Keep it to those who need to know, that then you grant them access. But you don't grant them access to everything but the kitchen sink. Well, they can have the kitchen sink because they might need to do dishes, but either way. So that need to know basis, again, one of the top levels or top principles that we always refer back to. The highest level of anonymity is things, for example, statistical, or you've got COVID results, let's say. And that COVID results, you don't say, John Smith has COVID, Jane has COVID. You can say, we've had 7 positive cases. And we've seen that enough over the last 2 years. I don't need to give examples there, but those things, you just try to keep it as anonymous as you can. Try not to disclose patient information. And then your legal authority. It isn't just the police legal authority. So if somebody comes and says, I want all those files, if it's a coroner, for example, they will give you the legal authority. Or if you're allowed to release information, there is a legal authority in your favorite Health Information Act available at a store near you. Or we have a few hundred we'd love to give out. So that information is all there. Now, obviously, if the police come to your door and say, I want the file, they'll need to supply you with a subpoena, a court order, or a warrant. So they just can't have it because they look good in a red serge, which nobody wears anymore anyway. So those types of things are very important to keep in mind. You don't release just randomly. And then, of course, consent and notification. So the Health Information Act says you must notify people why you're collecting that information. So, I mean, when they come to see you, there's an obvious reason that you're collecting that information. On the other hand, having a poster on the wall saying we're collecting health information to provide a service is sufficient and deemed notification. And then again, things like consent. Consent isn't something that you need to gather all the time within your circle of care, but you do need to start collecting it if you're going outside of that circle of care, like a ex-husband coming in wanting the wife's information, or things, for example, like legal counsel. There was a car accident, legal counsel may come to get your files, but they need the patient consent before you're releasing that information.
Yeah, and I think this
So
is
those are
interesting.
the five. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is interesting too, I think, in terms of virtual care. You know, understanding what type of consent you have and being very, very specific about it. I know there's lots of people over the past couple of years that have picked up phone, picked up Zoom, picked up other, you know, methods of communicating. Getting a patient's consent becomes really important in that mix to make sure that they understand the risks around virtual care, and that's also clear about, you know, what for example is the environment that they're in, so that you can have the discussions that you want as clearly as you want. So we've seen some interesting discussions around virtual care and the consent of virtual care, making sure that that's updated, because there is risks with any sort of care that's taken there. Ingrid, there's nothing more exciting for you, I know, than this slide.
I know you guys think it's funny, but CUD is really important. And CUD, you don't have to go in this order, but the reason that we love this order is because the way to remember it is that you regurgitate it like a cow chewing its cud. That's how I remember it. And I'm the queen of acronyms, trust me on this one. So the CUD whole principle comes down to collection, use, disclosure, and we added disposal because of all the incidents that are actually happening all the time. It's just that didn't spell CUD quite the same way, but we won't go there, or the proper way. So collection, only collect the information needed to do the job. You don't need to collect, let's say, a photocopy of the driver's license, because that information is not relevant to you with the exception of verification of identity. Or things like, if you're collecting the information, don't collect it from the neighborhood gossip or from, I got a lot of ideas, but, or from your coffee club. No, you collect it directly from the individual. Now, there's exceptions to every rule, and things like the elderly or minors. Obviously, you need to collect the information from a parent or translators. I've had that where they come in and you say, do I have your consent? And the translator said, yes, of course, but they don't even ask the person. And of course, I don't know enough languages to be able to know if they're legit or not. So, so try to collect directly from the individual unless there's a reason that obviously you can't. And then the informing the individual of why this information is needed. What's important about that is because if you're collecting information and you are going to send it off to Alberta Health Services, or you're going to send it off to, your college to explain what all you're doing, they need to know that. They need to know, they have a right to know as a patient what is happening with their information and who may receive it. And that goes to, how much you can collect and why we don't over collect information. Use is a given. We use it to provide a health service. So that's Captain Obvious right there. Obviously, that's why we're doing it. Determine or verifying someone's eligibility. of course, you have the right to use health information to determine that they're eligible to receive a service. This is especially relevant, obviously, in physician offices where they file it under Alberta Healthcare and have to bill for their services directly. So same as, let's say, with Blue Cross. If you're providing a service and you need to verify someone's eligibility to receive it, of course, you have the right to discuss it with Blue Cross. So these are types of things that use is a given, and then disclosure. Well, disclosure is really a tough can of worms because you need to be careful who you're disclosing information to. You can't disclose it to everyone, obviously. It's confidential for a reason, but the individual themselves may ask for it to be released to people such as legal counsel or insurance companies. So that is all understood. Please make sure to get consent to disclose to these third parties. And if you do disclose it to a third party, please make sure to keep a disclosure log, or actually you're required to, so you can pick a word. And then disposal, there's a policy in your privacy impact assessment, which you all don't have yet, but be patient, it's coming your way. And then the biggest thing with there is how you delete or handle your record deletion. Always make sure that they're securely destroyed. We've had cases, not just boxes in the garage, but somebody threw it in a recycling bin, went to a dumpster, and then lo and behold, the papers were flying down White Avenue in Edmonton, or, I was trying to think of McLeod Trail in Calgary. Anyway, these things happen, and it's surprising how often it happens. But that is still something you can be charged with if you are not adequately or properly disposing of your information. And then, of course, keep in mind your retention period. What did I forget? You have a look in your eyes like.
No, I'm just, I was just looking at the time, and once again, we're going to have to speed up here a little bit. So I'm going to take these next couple of slides because, Ingrid, if I let you go on these, we'll be here for the rest of the hour. I'm going to take the next couple of slides, and then we'll jump into breaches, which is actually, I think, really interesting for everybody here. So the privacy impact assessment is a formal document that your clinic or you as a practitioner will have. And that documentation is potential risks that exist within the way you operate your clinic or you operate your practice. And so the process is that you sort of go through a reasonable, rigorous system of, I use this technology, I do these sort of calls, this is what my practice is made of, here's how I dispose of information, here's how I collect information, here's my policy on this and that. Then you put it all together and you send it to the Privacy Commissioner's office. And they'll review it and they will accept or not your assessment of your own practice. So that's the privacy impact assessment. And it's not something that you're required to do today, but it is required under the Health Information Act. So I will say soon, although we don't know when. What we'd rather say is not a bad time to get started. Here's a good example of the policies and procedures that you will have to look at. And I'll just pick on one of them, which is a wireless networking remote access. So if you have a wireless network, what is your policy around ensuring that anybody who's using that wireless network is authorized to use that wireless network or is not? Or here's the controls you have in ensuring that nothing confidential goes across that wireless network. Maybe you've got a couple of wireless networks that operate within your clinic. There's a whole bunch of work that has to go to make sure that you've done that correctly. And so let's leave it for now because this isn't required, although we would highly recommend that we start down this process of getting your privacy impact assessments done. It's a good idea anyways, because it will reveal in every single case where we've done this with clinics, it will reveal holes that you may be blind to. And it's not as onerous as it might look. You just need to go through the rigor of it, and we would highly recommend it for any clinic, even if you're on pen and paper.
So a breach, it's really obviously any loss, unauthorized access to or disclosure of health information. And as a matter of fact, it also applies to personal information under PIPA. And we were going to go under all the laws, but again, we don't have 5 hours, and you'll be tired of my voice. I have a voice that'll chill soup, but anyway. So any activity that's unauthorized, or if it's in contravention of the acts or legislation, is of course a breach. And then the risk of harm. That is the biggest thing, is what risk of harm would it do to the individual that is subject to that loss or unauthorized access or disclosure of the information. And under a breach, snooping counts. All of these things count as a breach. And the list is long.
Just before we jump to the next slide, this risk of harm is another piece of legislation that I think is very, very difficult for a provider of health information or someone working in the field, a professional, difficult to assess. When we've looked at the Privacy Commissioner's decision, it's surprisingly low what the Privacy Commissioner considers risk of harm. So for example, if it was 1,000 patients, or in an example in Calgary, 7,000 patients that patients' information that were snooped or were accessed by an authorized source or something through Gmail, clearly a breach. If it's 7,000, makes sense. When we look at the Privacy Commissioner's decisions, we've seen examples where there's 3 individuals whose health information, 2 even, yeah, where that information was unfortunately given to people that it shouldn't have been given to. Now, not hacked, actually physically given and transmitted to someone that it shouldn't have received it. That constituted a breach because they believed that the risk of harm for those 2 individuals was substantial. And so this is another place where it continues to evolve. Our attitudes around risk are super important, and risk of harm rather are super important. That's why we all call Ingrid.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah, true story. He wouldn't be the first. But and the truth is, the most common cause of breaches are, guess what? People.
Humans, yeah.
Humans. And we have had so many that, and I'm not going to say it's human nature, and I'm not going to say it's people like me, but curiosity kills the cat. And snooping is a big thing. They just had to look. And it doesn't even always have to be a celebrity. It could be, oh, I've just got to check my mother-in-law's, or my ex-husband. I would just see, I just want to know that he's not doing well. Bad examples, but kind of true. And we've even had a breach that was quite large, because what happened is a young woman at a long-term care facility was looking at men between the ages of 18 and 21 during her lunch hour every day, because she'd find them on Tinder, and then she had to check their medical record. Like, you can't do that. But so breaches take all forms, and people sometimes say, well, I didn't think it was anything wrong to do. But in this case, yeah.
In fact, I should clarify, Ingrid, you said we've had one. Brightscript hasn't had any breaches. What you mean is that we've been consulted in the example that you said. So just to be clear, we haven't had a breach.
Yes, I do apologize. We've not, but we have managed hundreds.
We've been consulting on those things. So go ahead, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, see, that's how I get in trouble. I get too excited about this. And then, of course, cybercrime. That's huge on the uptake right now. Ransomware, try not to get hacked. There's lots of tips and tricks not to do it. My mother got hacked, and it took me over a year to clean up the mess that she left behind, just because she had to click on this link and then let some gentleman into her computer. Yeah, anyway, no comment. I have nothing nice to say, so I'll say nothing at all. And then sending information to the wrong person. Now, faxes happen literally hourly still in the medical world. And of course, there's email through non-secure methods. I could give you thousands, but anyway.
Yeah, when we look at statistics in sort of the in the breach world, and Jeff talked about this earlier. There's so many breaches that are happening specifically in the medical world that and I think we've got a slide coming up which talks about email being the #1 attack vector, because once they have access to your network, once a hacker has access to your computer, they can start pulling all of this information. To recover from that, and Ingrid's kind of given you her personal example of working with her mother, but to recover from that for a healthcare provider right now is about ballparked at $474 per record. It is expensive because you don't know exactly what they've done with that information. So there's multiple services that then have to be deployed in order to ensure that you've got that type of knowledge developing in terms of what happened with that data. Lots of breaches involving human, going back to the premise that we have to train, because if we train better, there will be less breaches within your clinic, within your practice that will ultimately happen. Yeah, stolen or compromised user credentials. You know, I can't tell you, and I hate to admit this for all of the professionals we work with, we get into many offices where, you know, there's a Post-it note that has the username and password for access. So extreme no-nos. So, you know, we did a quick, if you were, you know, curious people like we are, you can go back into the privacy commissioners and look at their investigation reports. Not hard to do, available on the website, and you can print out who's been attacked. And I think in this example, I don't even know if we've got, I think we just pulled, yeah, like a month of time, but you can see all of the breaches that are occurring and how many of them are actually the result of, you know, someone sending an email or someone sending a different type of phishing attack. And so these are freely available. You can download them and have a look. We've done the same type of analysis before on, you know, clinics in Alberta and what's happened to them, and it's interesting reading if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you'll notice the second biggest is unauthorized access and disclosure, which make up 39%, and that again is snooping and just curiosity. So it's very important, and this is all being tracked. So yeah, be careful.
So, you know, from an ongoing perspective, and I think we've probably mentioned this a couple of times, it's not a point in time. And we saw this maybe 10 years ago where people said, you know, I've done my risk assessment, I've spent all the time and energy it needed to do it, and it's now on the shelf. Well, guess what? That's an evolving discussion. No one cares if you were compliant 10 years ago. They're going to be asked if you've been trained and are compliant today. So part of the challenge for all of the health professionals is that this becomes another thing that you need to pay attention to in order to keep your practice and your patients safe. There's always updates to the Health Information Act, to technology, and privacy and security threats evolve. Not to say it too many times, probably make sure people are trained, and look for ways, you know, that you can add compliance to your routine. And so,
yeah, and to follow up on that training, the privacy commissioner themselves have indicated how strong that is, and they've actually penalized Alberta Health Services and made them train entire staff on privacy because they found that they were remiss. So this isn't just us saying train, train, train. This is actually the commissioner as well.
Agreed. Secure communication, we've added this part of the deck because we know that there have been, you know, lots of move. There's been lots of move in the health professions to start trying to work more virtually. And that it breaks up in two ways. One is sort of the email-like or asynchronous communication, where you can send a message, your patient will receive a message, they can send a message, and you will receive a message. That type of communication is asynchronous. That's part one. Part two is synchronous information, where you've actually got a video call or a telephone call where you're both on the line at the same time. And so there are obvious reasons for this, no question that there's an opportunity to improve client care. And I think nothing more obvious than some of the numbers that we've been able to see, where, you know, we moved from 6 to 7% of psychologists working online to 97%, which is an amazing an amazing shift in terms of how care is delivered.
So yeah, when I met with Dr. Malone and some of the other people at the association, we discussed earlier, things have changed significantly in terms of how healthcare is accessed and provided in the last 2 years, since nobody could go to see each other for a number of months, and hence Ingrid's at home in Edmonton, I'm at home in Calgary, Rowan's at the office. So and so that changed rapidly, and for psychologists as well, people practicing telepsychology, it was less than 10% before the pandemic, and now almost everyone is practicing some sort of client contact through digital means. And SecureMail is one way to do that. So the association actually came to Brightscript last year and said, hey, we think there's real need for SecureMail service for psychologists. How can you help us make that more accessible? So we've had a couple of questions come about SecureMail, so I'll address them sort of as we go through, and we'll get to some of the questions at the end. We have a lot of really good questions. Actually, it's going to be some fun discussion. So use cases in psychology, non-urgent questions. I mean, this is not something you want to use. As Rohit mentioned, secure messaging is asynchronous communication. We'll talk a little bit about how SecureMail works, but think of it like email. But email is not a secure way to communicate. It's not accepted by the Privacy Commissioner as a way to exchange healthcare information. Even if it's encrypted, it's not technologically safe. You think about, if I were to email Rohit right now, we're in the same city. That data could travel across the internet through different international borders where we don't know where it's going. It's not trackable. We don't know what laws it's subject to if it lands in that jurisdiction. We don't know who's touching it. So we'll look at that, what that looks like in a second. So non-urgent questions, because it's asynchronous, you don't want to have to reply right away. But if you have follow-up for a client, or a client might have questions about something that was discussed in an appointment, compliant transfer of documents, forms, questionnaires, diaries. We have dietitians, naturopaths, chiros, physios following up and saying, hey, how are you feeling after the treatment? Or we just started you on a new medication. How does that feel? From a psychology perspective, what have you found in terms of what we discussed last week? Just to check in with patients, and it's been found that sort of touch base is really helpful, not only in improving access to care, but improving the efficacy of care. So check-ins with patients, treatment follow-up, team-based care, professional collaboration. We see a lot of this because SecureMail is a threaded communication service, much like email. If you send a message to a group, everybody can reply all and see the replies. So we see this in team-based care situations. There's PCNs in Alberta that use it for the PCN communication so the PCN resources, psychologists, social workers, dietitians communicating with primary care clinicians as a team working together on different patient cases. We see it with
while we're talking about it, Ingrid, I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about what the Privacy Commissioner is saying regarding texting. And I don't know, Jeff, maybe there's a question that's come up, because that's the other asynchronous communication method, which is, I'm just going to text someone something. I don't know if the attitudes have changed from the start of the pandemic, but I got to tell you, they were pretty negative prior to that, because there's no ability to monitor the privacy of that. It's easily hackable, and so maybe you can say something about texting and the efficacy, or the Privacy Commissioner's view of that.
Yeah, it's still a hard no. If you must text, it would be minimal information.
Yeah.
And that would be January 10th, 2 o'clock appointment.
Yeah.
Not even with the name of the psychologist, nothing else. Try to keep that information minimal. And that's all so far that they will tolerate, for lack of better words.
The appointment reminder approach to a text, rather than trying to deliver or communicate when care or any sort of treatment. Okay, great. That's what I thought. I just wasn't sure if those had changed at all.
Interesting point there too, right? Even saying, including the name of the practitioner, can be information if it speaks to the type of care someone is getting, right? A family physician, everybody's got one. A dentist, everybody's got one. especially when you get into mental health. There's real concerns around that kind of stuff. So that's something to watch out for.
For sure.
Looking at email. So we'll talk really quickly about sort of how it works and what's bad. Rohit mentioned we would talk about this slide. 94% of malware is initiated with email. This is how viruses get into your computer and your networks. 72% of that is ransomware. Ransomware is the stuff that locks up your computer and threatens you to not have access to your files anymore until you pay a ransom, typically in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. What's changed in ransomware in the last number of years is because people have gotten really good at backup. The old defense to ransomware would be you back up your data, and if they take it and seize it, you start again from fresh because you backed it up this morning. But ransomware attackers, this is their job. This is actually what they do for a living, and they make millions of dollars doing it. So they adapt and they find ways to make sure they get paid. And so what they do now is it's not you won't get your data back, it's I will release your data on the internet for all the world to see, which is a significant privacy breach. And that's what causes some of those headlines that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. So part of what we do in our trainings is here's how to be cyber aware. Here's how to recognize the links not to click on an email, because email is such a threat in your practice. Part of the reason why people use SecureMail, we have clinics that have only used SecureMail as a way to communicate for a decade, because they're so afraid of getting ransomware or other viruses into their network, and then the impact that would have on their clinic and their patients. Healthcare employees, for a number of reasons, are 40% more likely to click on phishing emails. Part of that is because of the pace of a healthcare clinic. We don't always take the time to assess something properly. Also because people in healthcare tend to be more helpful, and they just want to do stuff that's nice to help out. So in 2020, there was over $100 million in Canada was lost to scams and frauds over the internet and through email. So it's a real business. Globally, ransomware is multiples of billions of dollars. I think it's up to $25 billion in revenue that's generated for ransomware attackers, as well as revenue that's generated for IT firms who have to clean up the mess. Consultants like KPMG and other large corporations work with massive companies to help recover from that. And we saw the numbers earlier with almost $500 per patient record is what you can expect to pay for a recovery cost. So keeping healthcare information secure through your communications methods. Brightscript SecureMail is something you have access to. We'll talk about on the next slide what it looks like for you as a member of the Psychologists Association of Alberta. But Brightscript SecureMail looks and feels like email. It's really hard to see on the pictures right now. They're kind of small. There's demo videos. We'll send out a demo video that just shows you kind of the look and feel of it, how it works, how easy it is to use. It is rated the fastest way to communicate between clinicians when we survey our users. There are tens of thousands of healthcare professionals that use SecureMail across North America. There are hundreds of thousands of patients in Alberta that have SecureMail accounts. There's over 200,000 Albertan patients that have access to SecureMail, and SecureMail is tied into the My Health records service provided by Alberta Health. So patients that were logging in there to get their vaccine records or other diary tracking, all kinds of stuff. It's a really good tool, My Health records. SecureMail is also access through there so they can sign up on their own. Any provider who subscribes to SecureMail can invite anybody. So you can see anyone can be invited. We support all users with live support. So if someone's having trouble using their account, they can call in. The big thing about SecureMail, though, is it doesn't travel across the open internet. Any information that you send to someone is actually just uploaded through a secure connection to our servers, which are housed in Canada, so we know which laws the data is subject to. We don't have to worry about, is it going through some country that's got a lot of issues around privacy. It's housed in Canada. And basically what you do is you upload that information, and by sending a message to someone, you're essentially assigning them access to view it. It's not necessarily, you're not sending it to them and then they can access it through secure means as well, through an encrypted connection there as well. There's read receipts. People find that very useful in terms of closed loop communication, making sure people did see it. Secure Mail is used by clinics for appointment reminders. So if you send out an appointment reminder via Secure Mail and the patient says, well, I didn't see it, you can look and say, no, you did read it, and you read it yesterday at 12:15. So people do that. There's also message recall. So if it's no longer appropriate for a recipient to have access to that information, if they're no longer involved in the circle of care, for example, or you accidentally sent it to the wrong Jeff McKay. It happens all the time. People send the wrong information to the wrong person. You can recall that information. And we have a shared inbox, which I know is very useful for clinics who are managing multiple clinicians. Information comes into staff, and staff then triage messages appropriately, or messages can be sent directly between users. It also blocks ransomware, and because it's a closed system, you have to be registered and verified on the system. There's no people there sending spam. There's no people there trying to sell BMWs or anything else. You know your inbox is relevant no matter what the message is. So before we get into questions here, there is a PAA member benefit. You are entitled to 25% off Secure Mail. Secure Mail regular price is $39.99 a month. It's a monthly subscription that you are free to cancel at any time. I will point out, we ran into this today, there is an offer on our website for 2 free months. This is a better deal than that. So don't take the 2 free months because you can't do both. This is forever. As long as you're a subscriber, you get 10% off every month. And there's the coupon code to use. If you have questions, you can contact our support team. Because we're talking about privacy, this discount, the $10 off, it comes into the privacy side of things as well. So if you want to get started with privacy impact assessments, training people at your clinic, access to guidance from our privacy team, you can sign up for that as well. There's a separate code. It honors that. It also includes Secure Mail. The first year for that is $150, or for you, $140 a month. And after that, ongoing privacy support, if you want to maintain support for your privacy officers, that sort of thing, you can continue and do that, and that's $99 a month, which would drop down to $89 a month. And that gives you comprehensive PIA, like I said, training, privacy officer handbook. We have an annual conference that we do. We're just getting back into doing live training events where people can come in. It's a 3-hour session, not a very abridged and sped up hour long. We've actually got quite a probably over 150, 200 slides or so that we go through in that presentation, and we get more depth into breaches and that sort of thing to help you do real breach avoidance. The email stuff, we'll show real examples of what dangerous emails look like and that sort of thing to get people through. So write down these codes if you want. We'll put them up at the end too. I'll point out, because we do so much work in privacy, we work with hundreds of clinics. We do regular training. We do regular webinars about here's what's happening in privacy this month, that sort of thing. We do have 9 podcast episodes where we analyze different healthcare breaches that have happened, talk about how and why they happened, and what you should do to make sure that they don't happen to you. So those are available on the Brightscript website at brightscript.com under the privacy consulting tab there. Just click on those and you can go and review those resources. So according to the schedule, we have about 21 minutes left. We have a lot of really good questions. Rhoda and Ingrid, I know this is your favorite part of the presentation. So starting, when we're talking about PIAs, what template do you recommend for your PIA, Ingrid?
There is no template.
Yeah.
So Alberta Health has published a very thorough PIA, but all it does is really put it into section A to E for you. It doesn't give you any of the wording or any assistance in filling that in. The second place to go is the OIPC website, which actually has a booklet on how to do a PIA.
Yeah. I think it's more of a table of contents. Would you describe it? Yeah, more of a table of contents than a template, but at least you'll understand the categories that's possible.
Yeah, and then the one on the OIPC site is a little more thorough, but again, it only says this is what it needs to look like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you know, the privacy impact assessment is meant to be specific to your clinic.
Yeah.
Processes and systems and software that you use, the office setup, how you operate in your clinic is specific to you. So it's not about saying, I promise to do everything right. It's about, here's how I do things in my clinic. and here's how I make sure that we're protecting privacy as we go about practicing healthcare.
Yeah, and here's my policies and procedures, how we are going to manage how we protect privacy within our clinic. And that's about, I'd guess, about 200 pages long.
We've seen when clinics do them, it's, we talk to people 80 hours of time to, I've heard people say they spent 200 hours working on their PIA, which sounds like a lot, but, and the other side of it is that it changes regularly, right? I think one of the dentists I was meeting with at one point put it well and said, why would I have my staff learn how to do this once, when it's going to have to change again in a year? Okay, next question. If you work as a contractor, do you follow the custodian responsibilities under the clinic you are working with, or as your own business, i.e. your own policy?
Are you working?
Go ahead, Ingrid.
I interrupted, sorry. It is, you follow the custodian, the lead custodian is where you follow, even if you're an independent contractor. So when I come into Brightscript, doesn't matter. When I work for a primary care network, I follow the rules in that primary care network, irrelevant if I'm an independent or not.
It's quite common.
That changes a little bit if you're also, in addition to working at that location, if you're also providing your own direct to patient care, because in that you would also you would then have to go through your own policies and procedures saying, in this environment I do it this way and I am the custodian. In this environment I'm an affiliate because I'm working for that custodian. So you can be both depending on your environment.
Yeah, you can be both, but I made the assumption that you're talking when you go someplace you follow theirs. Okay. But you are correct. Another gold star.
The next one is actually really interesting, I think, and I don't know if we've had it before, but in private practice, if patients pay by Interact e-transfer, their name is attached within our bank records. Is this relevant for privacy?
Yes, it is relevant, but we actually address it in a privacy impact assessment, and it follows the CDI rule, the Canadian Deposit Insurance rules. So that personal information is protected under the financial, and it is also addressed in your PIA. But that's a course of doing business, and that's an area that you can't, but that doesn't mean that you do not protect your financial. You still protect your financial as if it was personal or health information.
That's another great example about templates and PIAs, right? I mean, templates aren't going to have that sort of detail.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I can't ever remember being asked that.
Yeah.
No, but we have it in most PIAs.
Yeah, it's already in there. Yeah. It's an interesting one. But again, making sure that everybody's been trained so that you're not about to reveal the financial information of that deposit. So just knowing what to do with it and recognizing that there is a data flow through that process in order to get it, onto your screen so you can verify that it exists or getting it. Super interesting.
If the notification of the Interact email e-transfer comes into your regular email address, what do you do with that? Like, there's policies and procedures around those.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, because there would be a confirmation that something has arrived, and what do you do with that, and what's the policy around email notifications? Good call.
Use of commercial EMR, i.e. Jane, will there be a requirement for them as a custodian, or are they a vendor?
Jane is a vendor, and they are not a custodian in their own right. That being said, Jane has worked with us, and we have assisted them in writing a PIA to assist custodians.
So they would be an information manager.
Yeah. And so basically, you have to sign an agreement. Remember, there's that one element that says you have to sign an agreement with every third party. Jane would be considered that third party, and part of that agreement that you would be writing with them is if there's a problem with Jane, you want the liability of the privacy breach to fall to them. You don't want to have any liability there, and that's what that third party agreement would do.
Yeah, so that's your information manager agreement. That basically, they're as responsible to protect patient information as you are, but like Rod said, that agreement, if they mess up, it's on you.
It's on,
Here's another really good one. I work in a multidisciplinary clinic owned by a naturopath, who we don't see on the list of custodians. Hold on a second. We are in a rural area and I rent my office, but I am a sole private practitioner not employed by the naturopath. She employs a clinic manager who greets clients in a common waiting area and makes appointments for the naturopath. Clinic manager has no access to my office or charts, but would know who is in the waiting area to see me. What is my responsibility in terms of making sure this is a clinic policy privacy that the office manager is trained in?
Awesome. And
Great
yes,
question.
so you know, we've actually done quite a few PIAs for naturopaths because they realize that they're multidisciplinary as well. So there is an obligation for you as an affiliate or as a medical professional to outline what her responsibilities are and to keep that information confidential. She make sure you have an agreement with her on confidentiality at a minimum, so that she does not, or it does not disclose any information on who is in the waiting room, what they were there, why they were there, even if it's you know, it's amazing how much information they can garner just by the fact that, oh, I saw Jane in the waiting room. She was seeing the psychologist. Clearly, I bet you it's about this pending divorce. Like it just snowballs. So make sure that agreement's in place. That would be critical.
Yeah, really interesting question, because they do, by virtue of the fact that they're coming in and they know the patient's name and know them to say hello to them and greeting them, you must ensure that they've got some level of confidentiality training and what is the impact of them not holding that information confidentially. That's a really good question.
Next one is it's around keeping files. So it seems unreasonable that clinicians have to keep files indefinitely. So how does that actually work?
Ingrid?
Yeah, sorry. So the rules are pursuant to the association or the college. They set the rules and the guidelines for destruction as well as retention periods. So an example would be the College of Physicians and Surgeons have 10 years from date of last visit, whereas dentists have they keep only dental records for purposes of identification. Those are the only ones that they keep, quote unquote, indefinitely. And there's other factors to include, but yes, absolutely, that has to be stated, how long you will keep the records in your PIA and what you're going to do when it passes that time, how you're managing your records. But indefinitely is a very bad answer.
And that's the disposal part of it. In fact, to the point where your risk continues to increase the longer you hold that data. I know that we've had a number of these discussions with colleges, and we've kind of assumed 10 years is a good spot, and that seems to translate to many other jurisdictions. And so that's what we do with our retention policy. But after that, have a very, very well-defined disposal policy. And by the way, it's 10 years after their last visit, not just 10 years since they came and saw you. Open the file.
Let's see here. I'm sort of filtering. Some of them we're addressing along the way. This one we kind of talked about, but what is your assessment of online therapy programs that hold health information, such as Jane or OWL? I mean, we've talked about Jane a little bit. We do actually work with clinics to help with software vendors that we know are good. So we can actually consult on some of that kind of stuff. But Ingrid, do you have a general sense in there?
Well, the rule of thumb is if I'm ever in doubt, I go actually look at the listing on the Privacy Commissioner's site to see if they're accepted. So for example, we have thousands of accepted PIAs with our name on, like Brightscript as a provider. And it's the same as TELUS has some, Wolf, MedAccess, MicroQuest, Jane, Juno. Like there are approximately, I'd have to go with 30 some providers that are accepted in Alberta. But there are some that are definitely heads and feet above others. Like some are brand new and out of the gate, no accepted PIA. If
Those
there's
are-
no accepted PIA, yours isn't going to be the first.
Yeah, that's the challenge that we found is, you know, as new technologies are coming to market, we've got to make sure that they are vetted for the privacy commissioner, or the privacy commissioner will simply deny the application, in which case all of that risk transfers back to the custodian because they're using a product that hasn't been approved. And so, you know, that's a good place to start, Ingrid. I hadn't actually done that myself, but just going to the OIPC website and seeing if Jane's in there, that means that they have had a review of that software. And, you know, quite interestingly, we talked about moving targets earlier. There are products that have been used over the last number of years that once were approved are no longer being approved or have challenges now. And so it's not a fail-safe, but it's a good place to start.
An example of that would be Zoom. There are 4 accepted Zoom PIAs, and they have stopped accepting them because they are not compliant.
Yeah.
So that's why I mean it's a very good place to start, and you can see if there's 1 or 2. I'd be a lot more skeptical than if there was over 30 or more. So
part of the challenge there is that when people launch software for healthcare, or they decide to start using their existing software and selling it into healthcare environments, they don't consider the privacy requirements.
Yeah.
And they think it's something that they can add on later as a patch. And that is rarely the case. In fact, yeah. Going through a couple things, there was one question about secure mail options. Ingrid, you mentioned Zoom. Secure mail is one secure mail option we've talked about. Are there other ones that are accepted right now by the OIPC in Alberta?
we have not, there is currently no other secure mail product accepted. There was for a while, doctor to doctor. However, that communication is between custodians or physicians. And obviously that doesn't work for everything. The other ones that I could name have not yet been accepted. So you're right, the list is small because it's a very difficult thing to develop a product that is secure. Well, you guys know more than I do.
Yeah. I mean, there's some products that we've heard of. You know, we know that there's systems like WhatsApp and Hushmail and other systems that are out there. There's a difference between sort of that encrypted transmission and what's required for healthcare. And the biggest case comes down to the auditability of that information. And so it not only needs to be secure, encrypted, it also has to be auditable. And that's one of the ways that most other systems that we know of, even if they're claiming, you know, encryption and privacy, they still don't comply to the Health Information Act because it's not auditable.
And Alberta-based information versus storage in the US. Like once you start crossing some of these boundaries, and then one of the biggest thing is there is very, very few vendors outside of Alberta that will actually sign an information manager agreement. Yeah. And the commissioner will deny your privacy impact assessment, for example, if you cannot demonstrate you have an information manager agreement, because they want to see that you're protected as well.
Yeah. Great. I'm going to go through a couple really quickly. We do have checklists for privacy officers. That was one. That's the checklist we will send out. We'll send a checklist for privacy officer duties, as well as a risk assessment in the event of a breach. Quick question. How come GPs don't have to use informed consent forms where other professions do? GPs do have to use informed consent forms.
Yeah, so when you come into it,
if you're talking to GPs,
so
that's
when you come in,
their problem.
Yeah. But they actually have to. Now, some of them go on the implied consent. You walk into a GP office, obviously you're there for a service, so they're utilizing that. But usually what it is your front MOA or reception will inform you, or they have a notification poster up. But you are right, they must inform you. That is your right to ask for that as well.
Medical clinics and organizations, consent is one of their major issues that we work with on them. A question on social media. So in regards to progression of our profession in social media, what are ways we can assess privacy and compliance in this area? Example, clients following our public clinic profile on Instagram or Facebook, and the expansion of risk in this area.
Oh, I love it.
This is a great question.
Right. Okay, you go ahead first. You're the lawyer.
I mean, my take on it, so I'll qualify it, is that, make sure it goes through a couple of hands before it gets published, and it must be, information that is not patient-centered. It can't go to an individual, or you can't tag an individual, because that's too much knowledge that you would be disclosing. Now, I'll tell you, we get a lot of questions. We're saying, well, the patient consented to it. Yeah, they might have. I'm not comfortable with that level of risk, even if the patient consults to it. Now, if you're willing to take that risk and say, well, the patient consented to it, you have to ensure that they are informed as to the downside of consenting to that information. So, for example, if they want to do a testimonial video for you, and then they know that, you're going to want to make sure that not only have they say that, yeah, that was okay, and look, they appeared on video, they knew it was happening. You're also going to want to make sure that it says, kind of like those drug commercials, if you choose to do this, your side effects might be. Being very clear about what could happen if they choose to endorse you, what could happen if they choose to be included in a video or a tweet or whatever. Ingrid?
And a good rule of thumb is you can't consent your way out of breaking the law.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
that's the bottom line. So consent is great, but it will not cover you if you're doing something that's outside the boundaries. And to me, posting personal information or health information on a website is an accident waiting to happen.
Totally.
Here's a question where we got a couple minutes left, and we'll do our best to send out answers to all the questions, because we actually have about 15 questions after this one.
Wow. Well, congratulations to the group on the call. That's amazing.
Yeah, really, really high levels of engagement. It's great. So this question, I'm going to change it a little bit, because it says security of email to fax, such as SR fax. It is HIPAA compliant and SSL encryption. Can we talk about HIPAA compliance for a second?
Yeah, it's good. But it doesn't mean that it's compliant for the domicile requirements around data. It doesn't mean that it's auditable, because HIPAA compliance doesn't require those things. And so it's a good step in the right direction. You should have confidence that it's probably doing some of the right things, but it is not compliant for Canadian use. If you choose to take that risk, you can. It's likely not going to be approved, Ingrid, unless something's changed lately.
Yeah, no, that is correct. And not only that, they have BAA, Business Associates Agreement,
right.
that are not consistent with the Information Manager Agreement. So again, you're apples and oranges, and there is no correlation. And at this point, it is substandard to the Health Information Act.
Yeah. What happened with some of the laws in the US is that they have pretty sweeping powers to look at the data of patients or anyone else. And those sweeping powers that started with the Patriot Act, and it's been morphed into something else, Canadian regulators look at that and say, listen, this is not okay. Jeff, I know that we're probably out of time.
We are fresh out of time. We've got a ton of great questions left. So we'll send out the recording to everybody. There was a question about, can I share those with my staff? Share those with anybody who you think would benefit from watching it. It's not protected in any way. So we're happy to share this information with anyone. We will send out answers to all the questions that we can. There's, like I said, some really good ones, and we'll send those out to everybody so you can review them as well, because I think it'll be some useful information. Thank you, Rohit, Ingrid. Yeah, thank you to the team at the PAA, and have a great rest of your week.